On February 14th, millions of people exchange cards decorated with hearts. They buy chocolate, roses, jewelry. They post declarations of love on social media, make dinner reservations, propose marriage. Valentine's Day has become a global phenomenon, a day of romance, consumerism, and carefully curated affection. But here's what almost no one knows. The man whose name we celebrate was likely beaten with clubs, dragged through Roman streets, and beheaded in the cold darkness before dawn. His crime? Defying an emperor's decree by secretly marrying Christian couples who faced persecution. His death? A quiet act of resistance that the Roman Empire tried desperately to erase. History remembers the greeting cards. It forgets the blood. We've turned a martyr into a cherub. We've replaced a story of dangerous faith with the festival of safe sentiment. And in doing so, we've lost something profound. A reminder that love, real love, has always required courage. This is the story of Valentine of Rome, but it's also the story of how the most subversive act in human history, choosing love over fear, became the most commercialized day on the calendar. If you think you know Valentine's Day, you don't. You know the sanitized version, the Hallmark version, the chocolate and champagne version, but the original story? It belongs to those who stood their ground in the darkness of empire and were executed for it. To understand Valentine, you must first understand Rome in the 3rd century, a civilization at its breaking point. By 270 AD, the Roman Empire was unraveling, not from external conquest, though barbarian tribes pressed at every border, but from internal collapse, economic crisis, political chaos, a succession of soldier emperors, each lasting only a few years before assassination or battlefield death. The ancient gods seemed absent. The old certainties had crumbled. And into this vacuum came something Rome had never encountered before: Christianity. It spread like underground water through the empire's foundation, in homes, not temples, among slaves, not senators. Women taught it to children. Merchants carried it across trade routes. Soldiers whispered it in barracks. It had no army, no political power, no sanction from the state. But it had something more dangerous: a competing allegiance. Christians worshipped a crucified carpenter, not the divine emperor. They gathered in secret, not in public ceremonies. They pledged ultimate loyalty to a kingdom not of this world, which meant, by definition, not Caesar's kingdom. They refused to burn incense to the emperor's image. They wouldn't serve in the legions without moral compromise. They taught that a slave and a senator were equal before God. To Rome, this wasn't just heresy, it was civilizational treason. Emperor Claudius II, called Claudius Gothicus, ruled during one of Rome's darkest periods. He needed soldiers. The empire was hemorrhaging men to Germanic invasions, Persian incursions, internal rebellions. Every legion was undermanned. Every frontier fortress was vulnerable. And then Claudius noticed something troubling. Married soldiers made poor warriors. They hesitated before suicidal charges. They deserted to return home. They negotiated when they should have killed. Love made them weak. Family made them human. And Rome needed wolves, not humans. So Claudius issued an edict. Young men could not marry. The state would no longer recognize Christian marriages, particularly among military-age males. Marriage was a privilege for those who had already served. For everyone else, celibacy or concubinage, legal wives or none at all. The message was clear: your body belongs to Rome first. This is where Valentine enters the story. Valentine was a priest in Rome, though some traditions say he was a bishop in the nearby town of Terni. The historical record is fragmentary, deliberately obscured by centuries of Roman persecution and later Christian myth-making. But the core story persists across multiple ancient sources. Valentine defied the emperor's marriage ban. He performed Christian wedding ceremonies in secret. Imagine the scene: a small room, perhaps in a private home, or a catacomb beneath the city. No official witnesses, no state sanction, just two young people, terrified and hopeful, standing before an elderly priest who knew exactly what this ceremony meant. It meant death. For him, certainly. possibly for them. The Roman state didn't just forbid marriage, it actively hunted those who performed unauthorized ceremonies. Informants were everywhere. Neighbors reported neighbors. Slaves betrayed masters. In an empire built on control, every act of unsanctioned loyalty was treason. But Valentine continued. Why? The ancient accounts offer clues. One tradition says he believed marriage was sacred, instituted by God, and no emperor, divine or otherwise, could nullify what God had joined. Another suggests he saw these weddings as acts of resistance. If Rome claimed total ownership of the body, then marriage was a declaration of independence. But I think it was simpler than that. He saw young couples in love, facing a choice between obedience and their own humanity, and he refused to let the empire steal that from them. Each ceremony was a small revolution, each blessing a quiet rebellion, each "I do," spoken in defiance of imperial decree, was an assertion that some things, love, commitment, the formation of families, existed beyond the reach of political power. Valentine knew he was being watched. The Roman authorities had informants in every Christian community. Someone would talk. Someone always talked, and eventually, someone did. He was arrested, likely in 269 or 270 AD. The charges: performing illegal religious ceremonies, encouraging disobedience to imperial law, undermining military recruitment. They brought him before Claudius himself. Here, the ancient accounts become almost novelistic in detail, perhaps embellished, but revealing nonetheless. Claudius, according to one tradition, actually liked Valentine, found him intelligent, principled, compelling. The emperor reportedly tried to convert Valentine to Roman paganism, promising wealth, position, protection. "Renounce this Christian nonsense," Claudius might have said. "Honor the gods of Rome. Serve the empire. You're too valuable to waste on superstition." Valentine's response was unequivocal. He would not deny Christ. He would not sacrifice to Roman gods. He would not betray those he had married. And more, he urged Claudius himself to convert, to abandon the false gods, to recognize the one true God. It was an extraordinary moment of role reversal. The prisoner evangelizing the emperor, Claudius, reportedly moved but politically constrained, handed Valentine over to a subordinate, a prefect named Asterius. Asterius took Valentine to his home, possibly for further interrogation, possibly hoping for a private conversion away from public scrutiny. And here, the story takes a tender turn. Asterius had a daughter. Some accounts name her Julia, others leave her unnamed, but they agree on one detail: she was blind. Whether literally or metaphorically blind is debated by scholars, but the symbolism is clear. She lived in darkness, awaiting light. Valentine, imprisoned in Asterius's home, befriended the girl, taught her, prayed for her, and according to tradition, healed her blindness. The miracle changed nothing politically, but it changed everything personally. Asterius and his household converted to Christianity. They believed. They risked everything. But belief doesn't stop empires. Faith doesn't deter executioners. Valentine was condemned to death. The sentence: beaten with clubs until unconscious, then beheaded. The date of execution? February 14th, 269 AD. Before his death, Valentine reportedly wrote a final letter to Julia, the blind girl who could now see. He signed it, "From your Valentine." They let him out before dawn, darkness to darkness. Roman executions of political prisoners were designed to be both public and erasable. Public enough to terrify potential resistors, erasable enough to deny martyrs their glory. Valentine died as he lived, quietly defiant, offering love in the face of violence. His body was buried along the Via Flaminia, outside Rome's walls, in a place reserved for criminals and dissidents. The empire tried to forget him, but the community he served remembered. Here's what gets lost in the modern celebration. Valentine's Day isn't about romantic love in the way we understand it. It's about subversive love, dangerous love, the kind of love that directly challenges political power. Valentine didn't marry couples because marriage was romantic. He married them because marriage was resistance. Under Roman law, marriage created legal families. Legal families had rights, inheritances, social standing. But more importantly, Christian marriage created covenant communities, networks of loyalty that superseded allegiance to the state. When a Christian couple married, they pledged ultimate fidelity to each other and to God, not to Caesar, not to empire. Their household became a cell of alternative sovereignty. This is why Rome forbade it. And this is why the story was suppressed, softened, and eventually sanitized. The early church remembered Valentine as a martyr, someone who died for refusing to compromise faith under political pressure. His feast day, February 14th, was commemorated across the Christian world by the 5th century. But over time, something changed. By the Middle Ages, Valentine's story had begun to merge with pre-Christian fertility festivals. February 14th coincided roughly with the Roman feast of Lupercalia, a raucous celebration involving animal sacrifice, ritual whipping of women to ensure fertility, and a matchmaking lottery, where young men drew the names of available women. As Christianity became the dominant religion of Europe, it absorbed and transformed pagan festivals. Lupercalia became Valentine's Day. Fertility rituals became courtly love traditions. Pagan matchmaking became romantic gift-giving. Geoffrey Chaucer, the medieval English poet, was among the first to explicitly link Valentine's Day with romantic love in his poem, Parliament of Fowls, 1382, where birds choose their mates on Saint Valentine's Day. By the 18th century, printed Valentine's cards appeared in England. By the 19th century, mass-produced cards flooded the market, courtesy of the Industrial Revolution. By the 20th century, Valentine's Day became a commercial juggernaut. Billions of dollars in flowers, candy, jewelry, cards, dinners. The martyr disappeared. The merchandise remained. Why was the true story suppressed? Partly because it's inconvenient. A story of political resistance doesn't sell chocolate. A tale of martyrdom doesn't pair well with champagne. But more profoundly, Valentine's story threatens the comfortable accommodation between faith and power. It suggests that real love, the kind worth dying for, inevitably brings you into conflict with systems that demand total allegiance. Valentine said no to the empire. He chose obedience to God over obedience to Caesar. And he paid with his life. That's a dangerous story in any era, especially for those who benefit from political and economic stability. So we domesticated him, turned him into a cherub shooting arrows, reduced his defiance to a day for buying roses. But the original story remains, buried like Valentine's body outside Rome's walls. And it asks uncomfortable questions. What are we willing to risk for love? What powers do we allow to define our relationships, our families, our deepest commitments? Where do we draw the line between what belongs to the state and what belongs to the soul? Comment your thoughts. Follow for more, like and share. From Valentine's story, we extract lessons that echo across centuries. 1. True love doesn't just exist within approved boundaries. It challenges the boundaries themselves. When systems demand total control, the decision to love freely becomes inherently political. Valentine understood this. Every wedding he performed was an assertion that human dignity exists beyond governmental permission. In every age, there are loves the powerful try to forbid. Valentine's story reminds us that love which defies unjust authority is not rebellion for its own sake. It's the assertion of fundamental human dignity. 2. Valentine could have obeyed the emperor's edict. He could have stopped performing marriages, waited for the law to change, preserved his own life. But he recognized a higher law. He chose conscience over compliance, even when compliance would have been safer. We face this choice constantly in smaller ways: when to speak uncomfortable truth, when to resist institutional pressure, when to say no to legal but immoral demands. Valentine's example doesn't make these choices easier, but it reminds us they matter. 3. Valentine didn't lead armies. He didn't write treatises. He didn't organize political campaigns. He married young couples in secret. Small acts, repeated faithfully. Each one a tiny declaration of independence. Revolution isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's simply doing the right thing, again and again, regardless of who's watching. Teachers who tell suppressed history, doctors who treat the uninsured, neighbors who shelter the vulnerable. Small acts compound. 4. Rome tried to execute Valentine into obscurity. It failed, but only because communities remembered him. The lesson: historical memory is always contested. The powerful write the textbooks. The victors control the narrative. What stories aren't we being told today? Whose resistance is being erased in real time? Whose courage will be forgotten if we don't actively remember it? Valentine survived only because people refused to forget him. 5. Valentine's death wasn't incidental to his witness, it was central to it. His willingness to die for what he believed gave his message weight, permanence, moral authority. Suffering, when accepted for principle, transforms both the sufferer and those who witness it. We live in a culture that avoids suffering at all costs, but meaningful change, personal or social, usually requires enduring something difficult, not suffering for its own sake, but the willingness to bear cost for conscience. Valentine reminds us that some things are worth dying for, which means they're definitely worth living for. 6. The transformation of Valentine's Day from martyrdom to merchandise is a cautionary tale. We've taken a story about dangerous love and turned it into safe sentiment. We've replaced sacrifice with shopping. This happens constantly. Christmas becomes consumerism. Memorial Day becomes mattress sales. Martin Luther King Jr.'s radical vision gets reduced to a single sentence about content of character. When we forget the blood behind the symbols, we lose the power that made those symbols meaningful in the first place. Let's reflect. Comment your thought, like, share, and follow for more. Every February 14th, millions of people will exchange cards, flowers, chocolates. They'll post photos, make reservations, celebrate romance. And almost none of them will think of Valentine, not the real Valentine, not the priest who defied an empire, not the man who married couples in secret, knowing it would cost him his life, not the martyr who was beaten and beheaded for choosing love over fear. We've forgotten the blood behind the roses, but maybe that's not entirely our fault. We've been handed a sanitized story, a commercial holiday, a cultural ritual emptied of its original meaning. We inherited amnesia. The question is, what do we do now that we know? Valentine's story doesn't demand grand gestures. He didn't make grand gestures. He made small, faithful, dangerous choices. He married couples when it was illegal. He spoke truth when silence was safer. He loved when love was forbidden. And in doing so, he revealed something the empire couldn't tolerate: that some allegiances run deeper than political power, that some loves cannot be legislated away, that human dignity exists beyond governmental permission. The Roman Empire tried to erase him. For a while, they succeeded. His name disappeared from official records, his grave unmarked and forgotten, but communities remembered. They whispered his story in catacombs. They commemorated his death in secret liturgies. They passed his witness from generation to generation until, eventually, the empire that killed him collapsed, and the love he died for endured. History remembers empires by their monuments: the Colosseum, the aqueducts, the roads that stretch from Britain to Mesopotamia. But empires are temporary. Love, it turns out, lasts longer than stone. Valentine knew something we've forgotten: that the most subversive act available to human beings is to love freely, to commit wholly, to build families and communities that exist beyond the control of political power. Every marriage is a small revolution. Every family, a declaration of independence. Every act of love, a defiant assertion that we belong to something greater than the state. This is why empires have always tried to control it. This is why Valentine died for it. And this is why, perhaps, his story matters now more than ever. Because we live in an age of new empires, not political empires, necessarily, but empires of technology, commerce, ideology, powers that claim increasing authority over our bodies, our relationships, our most intimate choices. Valentine's question echoes across 17 centuries. What allegiance takes priority? What love is worth defending? What are you willing to risk for what you believe? I don't know your answer. Valentine's story doesn't provide easy answers. It provides an example, imperfect, fragmentary, but undeniable. A priest who married couples when marriage was illegal. A believer who chose faith over safety. A human being who loved when love was forbidden. The empire killed him, but the love he defended outlasted the empire. So this February 14th, when you see the hearts and roses, the chocolates and cards, the sanitized celebration of safe sentiment, remember the blood behind the roses. Remember the priest in the darkness. Remember the couples he married in secret. Remember the empire that tried to erase him. And ask yourself, if history forgot them, what might history be forgetting about us? The empire killed him, but the love he defended outlasted the empire.